Reagan was really, he was a movie actor, and then but he became the governor of California for, I think, 2 terms, and then he ran. So you never had a thing like this. But in terms of me, and sometimes I use it as an excuse, and I don't like having excuses actually, but I use it as an excuse. I had to rely on people that I respected or liked, but that I didn't know that well because I didn't know them that well. Some of those people I campaigned against because, when you have 18 people, we had mostly politicians running in the election, running in the primaries, and they got knocked out one by one, but I got to like some of them. Some of them I didn't like at all, and I don't like them now. And I'd rely on them, and I'd rely on other people. So all of a sudden, people would come in, I'd like to recommend so-and-so to be Secretary of State, and I'd have 3-4 people recommend. The one thing I can tell you, Joe, everybody wants the position.
Of course.
No, but sometimes I hear a lot of people don't want to work with Trump because Trump is tough to work with. Everybody wants to be any one of these positions. They die for it.
Of course.
Now, there's a particular guy in New York, primarily, very big, very successful, very strong, very political, although he's not a politician. He'd give anything to be Secretary of State, but if they ask him, no, I don't think I would do it. But in the meantime, begging for it, okay, begging.
I believe you.
Everybody wants it.
But what
no
I wanted to get
no matter what you do. But it's very dangerous to pick somebody outside of a politician because a politician's been basically vetted for years.
Right.
You pick a business guy, and they've never been vetted at all, and they're the head of a big company or something. They've never been vetted. You know nothing about his personal life. You know nothing about where he's been. When you put him in, it's a little bit dangerous because all of a sudden they get checked up, and you hear things that you say, wow, this is not going to work out too well. So it's very dangerous. Picking people that are outside of politics is somewhat dangerous.
So you're kind of stuck in a position where you have to pick established people. And then the problem with established people is established people are already indoctrinated into the system.
And they're stiffs in many cases.
Stiffs.
They're survivors. I find that,
What do you mean by stiffs? When you say stiffs?
A stiff, they have nothing. Or they're smart and survive. One little thing. So there was a congressman years before I ran, and I was very close to him. And I needed a license on something, and he was very important in getting the license. But it was a little bit controversial, the license, this particular thing, there was a big license. But I was close to this guy, and helped him and everything else. And I went to him, I said, I'd like to have your help. And he said, let me take a look at it. I said, ooh, that's not too good. But I really hope you can help. Anyway, he tapped me along for a long period of time. And I said, you are a stiff. You could have done this thing so easy, etc. It was controversial. He was in Congress for many years, like 28 years. And there's a reason when somebody's there for 28 years, you got to be sort of smart.
Right.
You have
A
all the
survivor.
And I realized he was a survivor.
So they never do anything controversial. They never take any chances to speak their opinion. It sounds like. Yeah.
And yet I don't disrespect him. So I actually respected the guy for 20 years.
He did survive.
You know what? He's been there for 28 years, and he made it through. A lot of people don't make it through.
It's a good way for non-exceptional people to survive.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
It certainly is.
So you're in there. You have 10,000 appointments you have to make. So you're getting advice from people. And at what point in time did you have a moment in time where you realized these are bad choices? Like some of these people shouldn't have had in there.
Oh yeah, I think so. The one question that you'll ask me, that I think you'll ask me, that people seem to ask, and I always come up with the same answer. If the one mistake, because I had a lot of success, great economy, great everything was great. We the military, we rebuilt it, biggest tax cuts in history, all this stuff we did. We had a great presidency. 3 Supreme Court justices. Most people get none. You pick them young. This way they're there for 50 years, right? So, even if a president is there for 8 years, oftentimes they never have a chance. I had 3. It was sort of the luck of the draw. But I will say that it always comes back to the same answer. The biggest mistake I made was I picked some people. I picked some great people, but you don't think about that. I picked some people that I shouldn't have picked. I picked a few people that I shouldn't have picked. And
neocons?
Yeah, Yeah, neocons or bad people or just loyal people or
people that were just
people
bad,
that were into the
people got bad advice.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, you're reading about him a little bit today. A guy like Kelly who was a bully, but a weak person. You know more about bullies than anybody probably around because you deal in a certain sport where the bullies are exposed very quickly.
Yeah.
But he's bad. Bolton was an idiot, but he was great for me because I'd go in with a guy like a John Bolton. You know John Bolton. A friend of mine called me up. I was picking Bolton. He's a very smart guy. His name is Phil Ruffin. He's a very rich guy from Las Vegas. He's a great card player. He doesn't play cards, but he's a great player. He's just a natural. Got poker sense, right? Good old poker sense. And Phil Ruffin is a very, very wise kind of a guy, and one of the richest people around, and has had great success and understands people. So it was in that I was picking Bolton, or I picked Bolton. He called up. He said, "Don't pick him. Why? He's a bad guy." Now he wasn't in politics at all. He's in various businesses. He said, "He's a bad guy. He's just. It always works out bad with that guy." And I said, "Oh man, I wish you told me this 2 weeks ago. I already hired him. He's here." And he was right, but he was good in a certain way. He's a nut job, and every time I had to deal with a country, when they saw this whack job standing behind me, they said, "Oh man, Trump's going to go to war with us." He was with Bush when they went stupidly into the Middle East. They should have never done it. I used to say it as a civilian. So I always got more publicity than other people, and it wasn't like I was trying. In fact, I don't know exactly why. Maybe you can tell me.
Oh, I could definitely tell you. You said a lot of wild shit.
Maybe.
I said a lot of wild shit, and then CNN, in all their brilliance, by highlighting your wild shit, made you much more popular.
Yeah.
And they boosted you in the polls because people were tired of someone talking in this bullshit, pre-prepared politician lingo. And even if they didn't agree with you, they at least knew whoever that guy is, that's him. That's really him. When you see certain people talk, certain people in the public eye, you don't know who they are. You have no idea who they are. It's very difficult to know. You see them in conversations. They have these pre-planned answers. They say everything. It's very rehearsed. You never get to the meat of it. One of the beautiful things about you is that you freeball. Like, you get out and you do these huge events, and you're just talking, and you're making. We've highlighted you on the show many times when you did this Biden impression where he's walking around, he doesn't know what he's doing. It's funny. It's stand up. It's funny stuff. But it's like and you were making fun of Elon one time. You were doing an Elon impression. It's great. You have like comedic instincts. Like when you said to Hillary, "You'd be in jail." Like it's great timing. But it's like that kind of stuff was unheard of as a politician. Like no one had done that. And I think
it's funny. You need at least the attitude of a comedian when you're doing this business. This is a very dangerous business. First of all, it's a very tough business.
It's the most dangerous business.
Well, for a job?
Yes. I mean, other than going to war and being a firefighter or being a cop, it's the most dangerous business.
It's the most dangerous. For being president is the most dangerous.
Especially you. I mean, you haven't even got to the election. There's been 2 assassination attempts, and they've brushed those out of the news like it was nothing.
Yeah, they'd rather not talk about them.
Imagine if there was assassination attempts on Biden, how hard people would be attacking the right, how they would be trying to get guns taken away from people, they would try to ramp up gun laws, they would try to figure out some way to blame you. If there was attacks if Biden got shot in the ear, we would have never heard the end of it.
But I think he's in good shape because it's only consequential presidents. If you take a look at what's happened, look, I'm for having countries pay us billions and billions and trillions even dollars. I took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China. Nobody took in 10 cents, not one other president. I do things that that don't necessarily make me so popular. I just do what's right. And when you do that, you're more, look at Iran. We would have never had the attack on Israel at all. Iran was broke. I told China, if you buy, you can't do business in the United States under any circumstance. We're going to go cold turkey with China. Some people think that would have been a good idea anyway. But if you buy any oil, 1 barrel of oil from them, you're not doing business. I said that to many countries. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hezbollah. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money. But I make myself I mean, I understand what I'm doing. You make yourself a target, and it's a very dangerous business. But if you just look at statistically, so I said, I sort of think, I don't know if it's right, but 1/10 of 1% for a race car driver. It's a pretty dangerous business, right?
Yeah.
1/10 of 1% for a bull rider. I tell you, to me,
You're talking death.
These guys that ride the bulls is worse than UFC. It's worse.
Yeah.
These guys, you see these big monster bulls, and you see it in slow motion where the foot is like, an inch away from the head. If it hits him, the guy's gone. But they die. They die.
So 1/10 of 1% die. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, 1/10 of 1% die.
Right.
And they certainly get hurt badly. Or really, I mean, they can't walk after a certain period of time. But with the president, if you look at
the amount of assassination attempts
and attempts too,
and
attempts. No, it's a very dangerous position. I never thought of that, by the way, when I did it. You don't tend to.
Did you just assume because people loved you on The Apprentice, they were going to love you as a president?
I figured it would be so easy. It's
well,
very
it probably would have been if the media didn't attack you the way they did. If they didn't conflate you with Hitler. I mean, even today, like Kamala was talking about you and Hitler. They're going to take what you said about Robert E. Lee. Oh, Donald Trump wishes the South won.
That's right. He loves Robert E.
They love to take things out of context and distort things. But
they don't even have to take them out. They make them up entirely. Okay,
they do that too.
But it's interesting when you mentioned I was very popular, and all those people love me. I mean, some of these women, they're so stupid. And Joy, she would, every time she'd see me, I'd be in the theater or something, and she's, you have to be on the show again. Come on, let's go.
She loved you.
She loved me.
That episode where people should watch that episode just to see what we're talking about. Like I said, we don't want to get a copyright strike, so we're not going to put it up. But if you watch the episode, it's bananas. It's like an alternative universe, and it's only 9 years ago.
Whoopi
loved you. Gives you a hug and a kiss.
And how about that other one, the new one on there, the one from my administration? She writes me a letter. You're the greatest president. She leaves. She worked as an assistant press secretary. I hardly knew her. But she leaves and she writes me this gorgeous letter. What's her name? She was, I don't even know, she was in the administration. She's on now currently. Sits on the far right-hand side, whatever the hell her name is. And she writes a letter, the most beautiful letter. She's quoted in the paper. He was the greatest president, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden she goes to the View. She started hitting the hell out of me. Because they won't hire her unless. I've had many people go on CNN and they called and said, I don't know what to do. They want to pay me a lot, but I have to be negative on you. I said, be negative. That's okay. There are guys on like CNN. They won't hire them. Sean Duffy is a congressman, and he retired. He got a good job with CNN, but he was only positive about Trump. So they kept him, but they would never put him on. I mean, I respect what he did. He could have gone, negative. I tell people, go negative. Let my friends make the money.
Well, it's just
so crooked. The press is so crooked.
It's crooked, but it's also they're diminishing themselves. They're killing all their credibility, and it's opening up the credibility to new media. It's opening up the credibility to independent media. All these.
The worst I've ever seen, though, and I've seen the worst. I mean, I've been a part of it. I've seen the worst. Kamala goes on 60 Minutes, gave an answer that a child wouldn't give. It was so bad. And 60 Minutes took the answer out. They took the whole, and they put another answer in.
They edited it deceptively.
Which didn't make sense either, but it was better. They took it wasn't editing. It was fraud. This was not editing. Right. Editing is where I'll give an answer and they'll take a couple of words and change around, or they might even take a sentence or two off, which is very bad. But it's sort of bad. I'd give an answer which was a very good answer. I always talk about, I like to give the weave. I like to.
You like to weave things in.
But when you do the weaves, and you have to be very smart to do weaves. When you do the weave, look at this. Just in this one thing, we're talking about little pieces over here, but it always ends up.
Home.
No, it comes back home. For the right people, for the wrong people, it doesn't come back home, and they end up in the wilderness, right? but they can take my answer, and you know what? They may take a little piece of it out or something, and they use the term, "Yes, we wanted to save time." Well, it's not. But I've never heard. I think it's the biggest scandal in broadcast history, what happened to CBS. So you have CBS 60 Minutes. That's a news program. It's not an entertainment program. It's under their news. It's the head of their news thing. She gives an answer that shows that she's essentially incompetent. and they took the answer. Could you imagine them doing that?
We can show it if you want people to see it. Can we show it? No?
Sure.
We get in trouble? We'll get copyright strike? Okay. Listen, anyone can find it,
you.
but it's drastic. But what was interesting was the other full version was available initially. It was like a preview.
Somebody made a big mistake.
Somebody put that preview out
Some
there.
kid put the preview out.
Exactly.
And then the bosses did this or that, and then all of a sudden they said, we got a problem.
Exactly. And then
they got caught by mistake.
Well,
but don't you think that's a bit, to me, and don't forget, this is election interference and fraud. And it's 60 Minutes, it's their news division, so it's a big deal. They give those licenses out, Joe, for free. They should pay a fortune. They're worth a fortune. They give them out for free because they're using the public airwaves. With cable, you don't have that. Cable's different. But, you know, it's just a different deal. But with the networks, they give those licenses. They're worth billions of dollars. They give them free, but you have to be honest. That was bad. I think that David Muir and that woman that was aside, I never even heard of her, but they kept interrupting me. It was like, I said, how many people am I debating here? I got this one and I got you two. But he went after me 11 different times. You know, it's interesting. I always thought he was a nice guy, but he's just like the rest of them, you know?
Well, that's his job, unfortunately, and I'm sure what they want. You're right. Well, the problem was they fact-checked you and they didn't fact-check her. And one of the most egregious examples of that was when she said that there are no troops right now deployed in war zones. Yeah. There's a very famous viral video that went online of troops in a war zone saying, well, what the fuck are we then? Because there's thousands of them. Dan Crenshaw, the congressman, posted on his Instagram all of the various examples of troops that are deployed, thousands and thousands of troops that are currently deployed.
Stupidly deployed.
But the point is, if this is going to be an actual real debate and not a propaganda exercise, if it's going to be a real debate, you have to fact check everybody. So like if someone says maybe she thought there was no, which is also a problem. So it's one of two things. It's either it was not true, it was a lie on purpose, which is terrible, or it was the opposite. It was ignorance, which is also terrible.
Well, Joe, when I said crime is soaring, he said, no, crime has gone down. I said, where did you hear that one? Crime has gone down. I mean, I'm debating with this guy, but I've had that.
Well, there was amended FBI statistics that came out after that showed that crime had gone up substantially.
And by the way, the statistics were a fraud. Because when they put out the statistics, they didn't include some of the worst places. They didn't include some of the worst cities, some of the most deadly places. But when the real numbers came out, I turned out to be right. But I haven't
You turned out to be right, but then there's another problem. Unreported crime is way up. Because people have lost, look, the morale that the police department has in a lot of these cities where they've done this defund the police bullshit.
Right.
The morale of these poor cops, it's fucking horrible.
Yeah.
It's the dumbest idea of all time. But what they've done is they've made these cops feel terrible. They're like good cops. I think cops are just like everybody else. Most of them are great. It's like everybody else. But if you run into one carpenter and he does a shitty job in your house, you say carpenters fucking suck. But they don't suck. Most of them are great, and that's the key thing with cops. But the point is, like, they did all of these things in this very foolish way, and these cops are suffering the consequences of it. And so subsequently what happens is a lot of crime is unreported. A lot of crime, like, you call the cops, they're too busy, they can't even get to you. Oh, your house got broken into? Sorry. You know, it doesn't even make a report. There's a lot of people that they just give up.
It's so sad what's happened, and I'll tell you what, I go to police funerals, and we went to one in Long Island. I visited the family in Long Island, a very big deal. It's so dangerous. People don't realize. The car, dark windows, pull over. He's a gentleman. Please pull over. Door opens. Guy comes out firing. Even if they were allowed to pull out their gun, which they're not, they can't, pull
do
out.
Do it in time. Yeah.
They still wouldn't have time.
It's every cop's worst nightmare.
They open a door. And he was killed, and his partner was hurt. He was killed. And you don't even have an eighth of a second to think. And it is such a dangerous job. That in particular, think of it. You go up to a car, you don't know who's sitting there with a gun. And if they have a gun, you really don't have a chance. You're not allowed to have your gun out, by the way. They have very strict rules. So, number one, but even if you could have your gun out, the door opens and bullets start firing out, and especially where they have the dark windows, where they have the darkened windows. It is such a dangerous profession, and it's very hard to get cops now. because they're not given any backup. And you're right. They have like an eighth of a second to make a decision that's going to change their life. If they make the wrong decision, they're going to end up on the front page of every newspaper in the country, and they're going to lose their house and their pension and their job, and their wife is going to be gone, and everything's going to be gone.
And here's another thing that people don't talk about. How many of them have PTSD? Probably most of them.
Yeah,
these guys are seeing people shot all the time.
Yep.
I've talked to a ton of cops about it, and a lot of cops commit suicide. A lot of cops are deeply depressed.
But we have to give them back their dignity. We just have to give it back. You said it so good. You never hear anybody say that. You're never going to have it perfect. You're going to have a bad apple.
Everything, in every profession.
But every time there's a bad apple, that gets massive publicity, and it taints everybody else.
But it's also this very irresponsible thing where people say defund the police, get rid of the police. Even Kamala Harris was a part of that. That it's a very stupid way to look at it. What you should do is fund the police. You should have better training. You should have cops that feel more appreciated. You should have something that helps mitigate this PTSD that all of them suffer through.
That's right. She was a big part of defund the police. That was a big thing for her. Defund the police. Always defund the police.
Well, it's a political idea,
but
right?
Anybody with that political thought, I don't think should be running for president, and I think people are getting wise to it. We're doing pretty well. Now, I don't know, maybe in a week from now, say, sorry about that, I was wrong, but we're leading everything. And I think we're going to have a very good election. But I tell people, because people are starting to get to know her, but she was defund the police. She was all these transgender operations. If you wanted a sex change and you were in detention and you demanded a sex change, they would give you a sex change.
Well, the wildest one is this idea of giving free sex change to illegal immigrants.
That's right. In detention.
That is the wildest thing. Is that the biggest problem you have? Yeah. You just walked here from Guatemala. You need to become a girl.
But she was in favor of it.
Yes.
So think of it. She changed. She changed 15 policies. In fact, I'm going to send her a MAGA cap.
She stole your idea about no tax for tips.
I came up with this idea that honestly nobody ever heard of. And now it took her 2 months, but you know what? All of a sudden,
it caught fire,
and she just put it into a little speech.
Yeah.
Well,
it became popular.
I think we still have that issue. I think that issue is a good one for us. But no, we have a lot of good issues. We had the other day. Think of how simple some of these things are. We're trying to get cars built in the United States. Detroit has been really tough. It's been a disaster. They have a huge factory, a huge auto plant being built by China in Mexico. Make cars, sell them in the United States, put everybody out of business. Right, here we go again. I said, if that plant is there when I'm president, I will put 100 or 200% tariffs on every car. They'll be unsaleable in the United States. And they just announced they're not going to build the plant because they think I'm going to win. Think of it. They're not going to build the plant. This was the biggest plant in the world. More than all of Michigan makes. That's how big. This is what we're getting to. And I said, if that plan goes up, I want them to understand if I win, I'm going to tax those cars at the rate of 100 or 200% apiece so that you won't be able to sell them in the United States. They just announced they're not going to build the plant.
Yeah, I read that.
I did a big favor for our country by doing that, and I'm not even there yet. To me, the most beautiful word, and I've said this for the last couple of weeks, in the dictionary today, and is the word tariff. It's more beautiful than love. It's more beautiful than anything. It's the most beautiful word. This country can become rich with the proper use of tariffs.
Did you just float out the idea of getting rid of income taxes and replacing it with tariffs?
Well, okay.
Were you serious about that?
Yeah, sure. But why not? Because our country was the richest relatively in the 1880s and 1890s. A president who was assassinated named McKinley. He was the tariff king. He spoke beautifully of tariffs. His language was really beautiful. We will not allow the enemy to come in and take our jobs and take our factories and take our workers and take our families unless they pay a big price. And the big price is tariffs. And he'd speak like that, but he was right. And then around in the early 1900s, they switched over stupidly to, frankly, an income tax. And you know why? Because countries were putting a lot of pressure on America. We don't want to pay tariffs. Please don't. Believe me, they control our politicians. If you look at the kind of numbers that these guys make then and now, But we had a commission meeting in the I think it was 1887. Think of this problem. We were so rich, we had so much money, we didn't know what to do. So they set up a blue ribbon commission on tariffs, and the sole purpose is what to do with all the money we had. We were so rich because we were taxing other people for coming in and taking our jobs. And China does it. That's what China did. If you want to open a factory and sell cars, if you build a factory or have a factory, they don't take our cars. They wouldn't take our cars. But if you build a plant in China, you can do that. Elon did that. By the way, Elon is great. That guy is such a great guy. I think you're a fan of Elon. He is from a different planet. He's the greatest guy. That rocket coming in, I tell you, I told the story once or twice. So you may have heard it, because these speeches have been good. Did you see the one last night? Yeah. 29,000 people. That was it. Yeah. And the one the night before was the same thing. We are rocking and rolling. But Elon, I'm talking to this very important guy. I said, wait a minute, I'm looking at something, the television's unmuted, right? And I see this rocket, it's all brown from the heat, you know, it comes 10,000 degrees pouring down at thousands of miles an hour. And I see this thing, you know, it's like a 20-story building. And it catches, and I say to this guy, he's an important guy, wait a minute, let me just put you down, hold it, I gotta see this. And I see this, and it's going to crash. I say, it's going to crash into the gantry. They call it a gantry. I said, oh, man, that's going to be a disaster because it's starting to get very close. And then all of a sudden, you see the flames and a bottom, and it boom, and then you see the two arms grab it. Crazy. And I forgot the guy. I had him on the phone. I forgot. No, I said, the hell with it. No, I called Elon. I said, was that you? He said, that was me. And I said, who else can do that? He said, nobody. Russia can't do it. The United States, nobody can do it. You know, I set up Space Force. That was me. And that's the first time in 82 years that we opened another branch since the Air Force. And that's going to be one of our most important things. But think of what Elon does. And he did one other thing that I never heard of it. It's Starlink. I went down to North Carolina, Georgia, the different places. I followed it right down. And they had no communication. The poles were all knocked down. And one of the guys in North Carolina said, could you do me a favor? Do you know Elon Musk? Yes. He endorsed me. By the way, he gave me the nicest endorsement. He said the country's going to fail. You should do the same thing, Joe. Because you cannot be voting for Kamala. You're not a Kamala person. I know you. I've watched you. I know him better than he is. You know what? Without speaking to you, I think I know you maybe almost as well as your wife. I have watched you for so many years. You're not a Kamala person. You're a Khabib person, but you're not a Kamala person. No, nobody's going to know who Khabib is, but he was not You know, I had a bad system. We had a horrible tax policy. I made it great with a much lower tax rate. So I took it from almost 40% down to 21%. Now I'm bringing it from 21 down to 15. But only if you make your product in the United States, which is going to be, and this is not a great idea. Nobody ever heard of that before. I don't care if they make it in Japan. Why should I give them? So it's a 21. That at 21 in the first year, we took in much more revenue than we did at almost bigger. It inspired. Now we had other things too. We were able to get people.
So how does the deficit increase because of that?
So what happened is we were ready to rock and roll, and then we had the COVID thing, and we had to focus on that. And if we didn't give some businesses a hand, they would have all. You would have had a depression like in 1929. But we were ready to start. We would have very shortly been paying off debt. You know, we have $35 trillion in debt, and I'll never forget it. It was talking about from, you know, the standpoint of being in office. I'm in the Oval Office, and I have John McLaughlin and Fabrizio. They're two very good pollsters, probably, I don't know, I would say the two best, who knows, but very good pollsters. And we're starting to think about running for a second term. And we had the greatest economy in history. Never has there been an economy like.
And you attribute that to lowering taxes
a lot
and
of
tariffs.
Two things, and also I cut regulations more than anybody else. And if I asked many of the businessmen, you know, from the big companies, you know, the guys running the big companies, I'd say, so if you had your choice, you've had it now for a long time, what's more important to you, the tax cuts, you paid less tax, or the regulation cuts? Every one of them said the regulation cuts meant more. Who would think that, right? Because you don't equate it to dollars, but it actually is more dollars. We had it going, and then we just had to focus on something else. But there was, you know, these two pollsters were sitting there, and they said, sir, if George Washington came back and Abraham Lincoln was his VP, as opposed to Waltz, how bad is he, by the way? But if Abraham Lincoln was his VP, they couldn't beat you. You have a, and I'll never forget it. The following day, they said, something's happening in China, sir. Could we meet? I said, what's happening? People are dying, and it was all around the Wuhan lab, by the way. There are pictures with little lines, their body bags, all around the Wuhan lab. And I always said that from the beginning, Joe, was, you know, they tried to say, first they said it was France, and, you know, they blamed everybody.
Right.
But then they say it was bats from a cave 2,000 miles away. So we got hit with that, and despite that, we had the best economy. And when I gave it over, the stock market was higher than it was pre-COVID. I mean, nobody could even believe it. But we saved it, and we were helping businesses. They were dying. You know, they were
So
dying.
it's your belief that if you had a second term, given the policies in place, the way the economy was booming, that you would have been able to pay off a lot of the debt, and
If
that was
we
the
didn't
strategy.
have COVID, we would have been paying off debt, and we would have had, and don't forget, by